Hi guys, and welcome to a brand new mod development update video. I'm Cylon Surfer, and today I would like to take a deep dive into the new Virtual Holsters 3.0 upgrade. Now I'm calling this a upgrade rather than a update, and this is because the mod has been reworked from the ground up in C++, offering many advantages and new features over previous versions of the mod. Holstering weapons is a simple question of taking a equipped weapon, moving it to a holster interaction zone and pressing your holster interaction button. Unequipping is the same, you just move your empty hand to a holster and then press that interaction button for a second time. I'm sure you'll agree that this is vastly simpler than previous versions and really streamlines the whole process nicely. Moving on, let's take a look at how all this works in first person view, and as we can see, things are moving around much quicker now. It's very simple for me to grab weapons and move them from holster to holster, and this is largely due to that move from Proprius over to C++. Clearly this is both far more immersive and much quicker than the vanilla system of opening that Pip-Boy, equipping a weapon and then closing that Pip-Boy again. Now that we have a visual representation of our holstered weapons, it is important for me to take a number of factors into consideration. One such consideration is those weapons with large magazines and how those weapons may look when they're holstered on the player character's body. So let's add our handmade rifle to the left hip holster here, and we can see that the magazine is automatically removed. It is re-added when we equip the weapon again, and the mod does this by using a blacklist file. This file is located in the VRH_magazine blacklist folder and contains a list of form names for which you wish to apply this feature to. And that was just one way in which the mod can handle problematic weapon types. As you can imagine, there are much larger weapons in the game, such as the minigun, and these weapons could look quite odd placed on the player's body. So let's take our minigun here and holster it. The weapon is hidden, and it does this by using a series of blacklist files. These are located in the VRH_weapons blacklist folder. There are two per holster, one for power armor and one for out of power armor, and these contain a list of form names of those weapons that you wish to be hidden. Let's take the minigun out of the chest holster for the time being and discuss a new aspect of the mod. As some of you may have noticed, the holster weapons are now being kept in the player's inventory. So that leads to some ramifications of, can we drop a weapon, for example? And the answer is yes, the mod does take this into account. If you were to drop your only copy of a holstered weapon, then the mod will automatically destroy that holster for you. We can keep track of our holstered weapons at any time by opening the Pip-Boy and pressing the favourites button. Here you can see a little list of what's holstered and where. Particularly useful if you're thinking of modifying your weapon, or perhaps you're thinking of selling one of your items to a vendor. And speaking of vendors, here I am in downtown Diamond City, and I'm going to strike up a conversation with this charming storekeeper here and see if I can't enter some trade. I'm going to sell him my handmade rifle, as that's currently holstered on my left hip. Confirm that trade and exit the menu. And here we see the weapon is no longer holstered, so the mod has taken into account that I've sold my last of that particular item type. And while we're here, let's look at a weapons workstation. I'm going to modify my only holstered weapon at the moment, the 10mm Survivor pistol. I'm going to add a hardened receiver onto this and then exit the workstation. And as we can see, the holster has been destroyed, and that is simply because I no longer have a 10mm Survivor pistol in my inventory. It is now a hardened receiver, so to continue using that weapon in a holster I would need to find it in my Pip-Boy and pop it back in the holster. So we've seen how the mod now tracks the player's inventory and makes adjustments in real time based on our actions. So I'd now like to take a look at another aspect of the mod. As you can see here, I'm now fully loaded out, fully kitted, all my holsters are in use. And what I really wanted to discuss was the impact that changing clothing or armour can have on the visual weapons that are now holstered on our body. Going back to basics, Fallout 4 has a base state, and here we are, unclothed in our Sunday best. And then we have a clothed state, and here we see the Vault-Tec suit. And then there is an intermediary state where we can equip various other items onto various appendages across our body. Mods tend to use these, for example. And then finally we have our armour state, and our armour state stacks on top of everything else and takes priority. And for demonstration purposes, I do have some armour today, so let's go ahead and get that equipped. As some of you may have noticed, the 10mm did move as I put the leg armour on, and here we can see that both the deliverer and also the security baton have moved position, so they line up with this particular piece of armour a little nicer. And to do that, I use some tools available to me in something I call configuration mode. To open configuration mode, we move our hand to a holster and then press the favourites button, and here we can see the beautiful virtual holsters configuration mode UI. I'm not going to go into too much detail just yet, but we can see here that we're in weapon reposition mode, and that the left chest holster was the holster we used to enable it. I can cycle through my holsters by pressing the that button, so I can configure a different weapon should I choose to. Let's take another look at that deliverer that is currently holstered on my left chest, and to reposition this I would now use the primary controller's analog stick to move that forward and backwards, and then right and then left. I can then use the offhand stick to move it down and up. I can also rotate the weapon, and to do that I hold down the primary controller's grip button and then use its analog stick to control yaw and pitch. And whilst I have that primary grip button held down, I can also use the offhand analog stick to then control roll. We can enter FRIK's selfie mode at any time, and to do this we hold down the primary controller's grip button and then quickly press the favourites button. Whilst in selfie mode we can also enter a zoom mode, and to do that we hold down the offhand's grip button and then press the sprint button, and that just gets us a little closer to the action and we can really get in there and reposition that weapon. We can also switch to a rear view mode. First we'd need to exit the zoom mode and the selfie mode, and then we'd press offhand grip and the sprint button, and this allows us to get a clear picture of what's going on the back of our character. Before we exit configuration mode, we'll need to save our new configuration, and as you can see you get a nice little notification. And now we're safe to exit configuration mode by pressing either the left or right trigger button. And if you hadn't saved that configuration, you would have found that after unholstering your weapon and reholstering it, it would have returned to its original position. Now we finally get to see what happens when we unequip and then re-equip our leather chest armour. And as you saw, the weapon repositioned automatically, so this gives you some idea of how we can use these tools to produce a number of profiles for weapons in holsters, which then match and react to our various armour or clothing loadouts. Power Armour uses a similar concept, so let me go ahead and jump into this conveniently placed frame here, and we can take a look and see what happened to those holstered weapons. And I think we can agree that this all looks quite nice. The weapons are repositioned against the frame here quite nicely. This is of course only the base state of the Power Armour. We can equip additional armour items on top of this frame, such as chest pieces or leg pieces, And much as when we're in on foot mode, these weapons do reposition automatically when you do this, which is particularly useful in power armor, as power armor items can be destroyed in battle, and it just ensures that those weapons are snapped back to their on-frame positions when this happens. And if we go ahead and jump out of this power armor frame, we can see that our weapons have been repositioned back to this particular clothing item's profiles, and everything is looking quite nice. So that really does bring me on to the final subject when it comes to weapon display and positioning, and that's something called holster artwork. And taking a peek, we can see that they do look absolutely fantastic, really complementing that holstered weapon look and feel. These are some that I've created in Blender myself, and I've tried to remain as true to the original visual style of Fallout 4 as possible here, so they really do blend in. You'll be able to get your hands on this very holster artwork via my Patreon, where I'll be providing a pack which will include holsters for almost 40 of the game's base weapons and in 5 different colour varieties. Holster artwork is semi-persistent, and by this I mean I can equip a holstered weapon, and when I do, its artwork will remain intact, and it will remain like this unless I were to place a different weapon into that holster, or sell, drop or modify the only copy of a holstered weapon. I can also delete holster artwork by opening my Pip-Boy and equipping my holstered weapon. And as we see, the weapon is equipped and the holster art has gone. The mod also supports end-user created holster artwork, and I released a video not too long ago detailing how you can create these. It goes through how you can download mods from the Nexus and take models from those, or should you wish, make them yourself in Blender. Virtual holsters will ship with 2 types of holster art, and those will be for the 10mm pistol and the double-barreled shotgun. Hopefully these will give you a small taste of how the holster art works and how it looks in game. Let's make a stop at the dugout inn, and while we're here I'd like to have a quick discussion about how having our weapons holstered on our bodies like this can lead to the inadvertent accessing of fist mode. Now, fist mode is very easy to enter, we just press our trigger button. However, it's not so easy to exit. We have to press our favourites menu button, followed by our put away button, followed then by pressing the trigger button to exit the favourites menu. Now, as I'm sure you can probably see, this can get quite frustrating quite quickly, but the mod does take this into account, and now you can still go into fist mode and have a little fight. And when you want to exit your fist mode, you just press the trigger for a second time, and you'll also notice I've fixed the left fist here so it now clenches when we're in fist mode, and I've also taken into account that you may want to do a power attack as well. So we've seen all of the new visual upgrades to virtual holsters and how we can tweak those to our tastes. So now is a good time to start looking at those interaction areas themselves and how we might want to reposition these around just to get them dialed in and working as well as they can. To do this, we need to enter configuration mode, and from here we press the change mode tile. You can see we're no longer in weapon reposition mode, and we can still change between our spheres using the VATS button. Activation zones are shown in their true size, as opposed to during normal gameplay where they may appear much smaller. The controls are almost the same as weapon reposition mode, with the one difference that you can scale the interaction zones with your offhand controller. Each holster has 4 profiles, and these profiles are linked back to the character sneaking, standing upright, standing in power armor, and sneaking in power armor. You can use the configuration menu here to configure a position and size for each of these holsters in each of these states. Don't forget, save your profile before you change your stance, and you can check your current stance using the indicators here and here. I would recommend that you spend quite some time here configuring the holsters for the various stances. Really, it is quite key to the mod's operation that the holsters are positioned and scaled in places that they work best for you. Creating profiles for the 2 sneak postures can be particularly useful, As many of you all know, the FRIK body does have a tendency to move quite far back when you're sneaking, so configuring profiles where these interaction zones are moved slightly forward, or perhaps even scaled, may be of benefit to you. One piece of advice I can offer is that after saving a configuration, I would test that configuration outside of configuration mode, looking straight forwards, and if that holster is not working as you expect, just pop yourself back into configuration mode and just give it a slight tweak. So we've seen how we can reposition our weapons and create profiles for various different clothing or armor types, and we've taken a look at those holster interaction zones and how we might want to configure those for the various states our character will find themselves in. So now it's really time to take a closer look at the virtual holster's config mode UI, as really until this point we've only looked at the sphere and weapon positioning modes and the change mode and save mode tiles. I'll start in the centre with the help manual tile. If I give this a quick press, the help manual UI will open, and down the sides here we can see some descriptions of the various tiles and what functionalities they provide, and in the centre we can see a list of the config mode's main bindings. And to close the help UI, we simply just press the help manual tile for a second time. You'll notice that there are two swap grip and A tiles, and what these tiles do is allow you to swap the config mode's binds for these buttons should you find yourself in a position where you're having to hold down the A button rather than the grip button. Moving on, we have the toggle haptics tile, and this tile simply allows us to enable or disable the mod's haptic feedback. We then have the swap weapon visibility tile, and this essentially allows us to determine if the holstered weapons will be visible or not. In a similar vein, we have the toggle sphere visibility tile, and this tile allows us to disable or enable those visual representations of the holster interaction zones as we move our hands in and out of them. Then we have the disable activation tile. Its functionality is enabled as default, and this is because the mod also ships with its holster interaction button configured to be the game's activate button. The feature blocks the accidental activation of objects while we're interacting with our holsters. For example, if Dogmeat were to run past my right leg, just at the moment I were to unholster my pistol here, without this fix enabled, I would both unholster my weapon and start dialogue with my companion. But with this fix enabled, I would just unholster my weapon and the fix will prevent me from accidentally activating Dogmeat. It would also prevent me from activating a terminal which was placed directly behind me whilst reaching behind my back to equip my sniper rifle. This next tile was designed for people like myself who do not use the game's VATS feature. It allows us to disable VATS completely and frees up a controller bind which we can use with mods such as this one. It is important to note, however, that it is not compatible with mods that change VATS, such as the Bullet Time VATS VR mod, and this neatly leads me on to the topic of the swap holster button tile. Using this, we can cycle through our controller buttons, which we're then able to bind to this mod's holster activation button. As standard, you'll be able to switch between the game's activate and reload buttons. However, by enabling that disable VATS feature, we can then add the choice of using the VATS button as well. And finally, we have the return all weapons tile. This simply provides a means for us to clear all of our holsters, resetting them to their base states and ready for us to create a fresh loadout. Config mode has one final function, and that is called master mode. Master mode is what I consider a advanced level task, and as such can only be enabled via the mod's INI file. Once enabled, this provides the ability for you to update the base positions of where each holster will initially display its weapons, should you not have an override profile for this particular holster weapon clothing combination. You could use this if, for example, you didn't like the mod's base position for the weapons being placed in the left hip holster. So if I wanted to update this, I would need to enter configuration mode and then save my preferred positions for both a ballistic and melee based weapon that I've placed into that holster. After I've done this, all subsequent weapons placed in this holster will adopt the new positions should an override profile not be present. This also extends to power armor, so I can update the mod's default profiles for not only the base power armor frame, but for each of the chest and leg armors that I'll place on top of that. I do not recommend that this feature is used during normal gameplay, and that you disable it in the mods INI file once you're finished with it. And as you can see, the Virtual Holsters config mode really does offer a wealth of choice when it comes to getting this mod set up and then configured to your own personal preferences. And that nearly brings this video to a close, but before I leave you, let's take a look at Virtual Holsters live in action. And this is more to demonstrate just how much the mod improves the general fluidity of the game's combat system. I first dispatched the lookout with my 10mm pistol before switching to my shish kebab and slicing down this chump, and then quickly changing to my shotgun so I can finish off his buddy here, and then I dash for cover while changing to my 10mm pistol so I can engage with these guys taking refuge in the shack. No menus were open during this gameplay segment, and I was able to dynamically switch between my holstered weapons based on what the situation called for. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rolling Rock for all of his advice and help during the development of this project, and to remind anyone who would like to support my work or simply show their gratitude by buying me a pint that they can do so by subscribing to my Patreon, and as a token of my thanks, members do gain access to a growing collection of Skyrim and Fallout mods and add-ons. Take it easy guys, I'm Cylon Surfer, by your command.